Okay, so I'm back here with two pretty fantastic guests. This is Mike and Ryan, and I'll have them introduce themselves. But essentially, these guys are coming from what I like to call indie boutique publishers. Sounds fancy. Whether or not you agree with that, you can debate. But these two folks have been in the industry for a while, and I think they're going to have a lot of really great insights and gems of wisdom that we're going to share in the next half an hour. So if you don't mind, guys, pick and choose who would like to intro, maybe your studio, what your background is, and sort of the vision of what you're doing.
Sure. Do you want me to start?
Yeah, you can go first.
All right, cool. There's going to be a lot of that, I think. So I'm Ryan. I'm from Noodlecake Studios. We are in the middle of Canada, a place called Saskatoon. Probably most of you have never heard of it. If you're flying from Vancouver to Toronto, just jump out of the plane halfway and you'll land in Saskatoon. We started out in about 2011 as a first-party studio making iPhone games. And we kind of pivoted into publishing a little bit when Android came out. The quick TLDR story is we developed some software in-house that allowed us to run native Objective-C code on Android. Figured a bunch of our indie friends would probably want to capitalize on this because none of them were even supporting Android at the time because it was such a new platform. So we used that and decided instead of doing a tech license or something because Unity was looming, we knew these cross-platform tools were on their way. We decided to make a publishing company out of it, and the catch was we would take your game, port it for you for free, and then we would just take a cut of the rev share, market it, do all that sort of stuff. So our Android catalog is actually quite massive because we've been doing this for a while. Things just kind of continued to move along, and we started getting developers coming to us who said, hey, you can market and publish these games better than we could on any platform, so why don't you take the whole thing? And then so we kind of moved into a more traditional publishing role, as well as still making our own first-party games at the time. That we kind of use to then snowball and cross-promote our games. So every time we launch a new game, it goes out to all of our users across all of the games that we have in our catalog, which on Android I think is over 100 and some at this point probably now. It's getting quite big. We still do some one-off publishing deals, but they're kind of more for the higher end indies, if you will. So, the Snowman team, we did the Alto series for them. We recently took over the Capybara contract for Sword and Sorcery. We've worked with Cyan on Myst and things like that. So we kind of do some of these bigger ones, but for the most part now we're cross-platform publishing and moving into Steam and console space now too. So we're kind of running the gamut.
Cool. That was awesome. Yeah. So I'm Mike. I'm the CEO of Iron Horse Games. Iron Horse has been around for about 2 years. We mostly focus on publishing idle games. Iron Horse, if you're curious, is one person, and he's standing here on stage. We put out 11 or 12 games since December. We're doing pretty heavy user acquisition across the portfolio at this point. I mostly focus on small and medium-sized teams, one-person teams like Ben there, who's one of the teams I work with. Ben's the very talented developer behind Swarm Simulator, if you guys have played that, which is a great game. Prior to that, I was the vice president of publishing at Congregate for about 4 years, focusing on their mobile publishing business. That's the long and short of it.
Great. Thanks, guys. Maybe you can speak a little bit about what's your journey been like so far as a publisher. It's very different than working for a big company. It's very different than being purely an indie developer. So any thoughts you'd like to share on what that journey's been like so far?
Yeah. Challenging is probably one word for it. I think this was mentioned in the previous talk that Sarah did. The marketplace shifts radically, and you need to respond to it quickly. So started about 2+ years ago, and in that time, I have changed my business model fundamentally 3 times and successfully dodged a couple of bullets. So hopefully I've got a couple more of those left in me. As challenging as it is, I think one of the things that's great about it is you can help small and medium-sized developers actually grow. I've had a lot of conversations with developers where, they've actually tried to dissuade me from signing their games and working on them. I've had conversations where developers have said, "Are you sure you want to invest in this game? Like, you think it's really going to do this well?" And the answer 9 times out of 10 is yes. At least it's going to do well enough to be worth the effort to put it out. And in many of the cases, it's well enough to generate a significant amount of revenue for myself and the developers. So it's been challenging, but if you can adapt quickly to the changing marketplace on iOS and on Google Play, you can capture a lot of success.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of piggyback on that answer. He's right. You got to be lean and you got to be able to move. For us, our publishing is we do the user acquisition and marketing side of things too, but we're also more of a technical publisher. Teams will come to us with partially finished projects, and it can range from 25% to 85%. It doesn't really matter. Kind of depends on when they decide they want to reach out to a publisher. So we take on games of all sorts and sizes, and how those deals work really depends on what they're looking for. And so one of the big things is like being very quickly able to adapt to the market, because again, Unity didn't exist back in the day when we started this, and now it does, and it's everywhere. And that totally crushed the whole porting side of things, but we saw that coming, so we had to adjust. The fall at the bottom of pricing was a huge thing we had to adjust for, because back in the day when only 4 games came out a month, you could charge $5 for that game and it was great. But now it's like everyone's releasing 100 games a week. So, how do you acquire users through different means than just looking for feature placement on the stores and things like that? So yeah, you got to be able to move and adapt. And I think we've been we've been good at doing that at the office, and still a part of us we like to stick to our roots when it comes to games and the games we're working with. So if it's something we think is fun and cool, we'll probably figure out a way to work with you too on it. So it doesn't necessarily have to fall into a single type of genre.
Great. I think if I don't ask this, someone will probably ask this during the Q&A. So what are you looking for in games, in indie games specifically, that catch your attention? How as an indie game developer, do you create a really effective pitch to drum up interest around a publisher such as yourself or any of the other publishers out there?
Yeah, so for us, we see a lot of pitches every day. I would say we're probably in the range between 10 and 15 pitches of games a day. That throughout the week, we're tallying up to over 100 pitches. We see very wildly range in quality. But to stand out, I mean, you're probably not as clever as you think you are. I'll tell you that right away, because we see a lot. So the big thing for us is when we're looking for games, I mean, we obviously are looking for something that is going to catch us from, something, is it interesting? Is it different? If it's very generic, run of the mill, we've seen it a million times, it's probably not going to do that much for us. So if it is a genre of something that exists already, try to put a unique spin on it, something that might not be something we've seen before. Or if it is, just make sure it's damn good, because a lot of people just stick to a Unity template and that's it. And that's not going to help you either, because we've literally been pitched Unity templates before as potential publishing games. So it's a pretty wide smattering of things that we work with. But if you can hook us with something unique, something interesting, and you are going to sell it just as much as the game is. So are you a competent developer? Do you know your stuff? Do you know, the roadmap for your games? Do you know the costs to get some things done if you need funding? Having your stuff together is just as important as the game itself, because, we'll vet you as a developer. And if we think we can't work with you on something, then we'll dump the game, even if the game itself is cool. So.
Yeah, to piggyback off what you said, one of the first checks that I do when I'm talking to a developer is if we have a shared sense of what success is going to look like on the title. I think a lot of developers haven't either thought about that, or they think about themselves as artists as opposed to businessmen. You can be an artist. You can put the game out as an art project. You just can't come to me to publish that game, because I won't publish it.
But we might.
Yeah, you should talk to Noodlecake, but don't talk to me. The reality of the situation is, I'm looking to help you grow a business, and if we don't share that at the start of our relationship, then it's over before it starts. I think the other important point is you should think about the game and how you pitch and present the game the way that I think about it, and how I'm going to take it to places like Google and Apple. So if you were to come to me and you're like, hey, I've got a game, it's like Clash of Clans, but they're pandas. It's like that's not gonna cut it. What I'm really looking for is something that's going to kind of move the genre forward in a way that's introduces some complexity that doesn't exist there now, and then usually a presentation or art style that's slightly different or unique that you haven't really seen in that genre before, or that's really well executed. I think when I'm trying to tick those boxes myself, I'm not trying to tick them because those are things that are inherently interesting to me, although they are interesting. I'm ticking them because it helps to differentiate the title to Apple and Google for featuring purposes and support, and to just get their attention to get feedback on the game. So think about that when you're pitching games to publishers too. It's really important.
Yeah, like we had a game called Chameleon Run that we published years back, and that game is basically, you've seen the genre before 100 million times. It's an auto runner with a color switching mechanic, but the developer who made it understood how to push that genre forward in such a unique way. His controls are beyond tight. The onboarding was amazing. He had a great visual style and just kind of pushed it into a way that was like, you've seen it, but not like this. And it was great. And it was one of those games that when we got pitched the demo of that game, it was just a couple like demo levels, and we got it over a lunch hour, and we were at a restaurant, and a couple of the guys started playing it. One guy went to the washroom, stayed in the washroom, and beat the entire demo while he was in the washroom. We all went back to the office, and we knew right away that there was something there, right? There was a hook to that game. Ended up winning an Apple Design Award, has been Editor's Choice on Google Play. It was a huge smash for a game that essentially at its core is still just an auto runner, but they pushed the genre forward. So that's definitely something that we look for too.
That's actually me in Flip Flop Solitaire. Yeah, I played a whole lot of that game. Very basic concept, but like just so well done. Yeah. Talk to me about how you look at success. Success is a very broad term, and success is something that means a lot of different things to different people. So talk to me about how that looks for you, and perhaps maybe how indies should be looking at success on mobile.
For us, success definitely, there's the monetary aspect of it is like the easy one to just say, oh, is it going to make money for us and the developer? That's obviously the starting point that people are looking at, but what kind of money that makes definitely can vary. Success to one developer might be totally different to another one depending on their needs. Is this a full-time gig that you're doing? Is it an evening and weekend project? We've had some devs who, they just wanted to make their development money back. We've had others who this was like, I might lose my house situation. Don't be that developer, please.
Please don't be that developer.
But there are devs out there like that. So, there's nothing wrong with being what I like to call a blue collar indie dev. Like, you don't have to set the world on fire with one game and make $1 million and retire. It's not probably going to happen. So, if you make enough to make your next game, that's success to me.
Yeah, for me, success is kind of three different definitions there. The first for me and the most obvious was being able to generate enough revenue to reinvest back into the business and grow the business, both for myself and for the developers. So that's over the last 6 or so months, we've been doing some pretty heavy marketing, and that's all bootstrapped. So that's off of revenues that have been generated off the game, that have been reinvested in the game, that have led to larger revenues that let me reinvest, blah, blah, blah. And then fund new games as well. So that's a market success for me. I think, dovetailing with what I was saying before about developers approaching me and not really seeing what I see in their games, I think it's particularly satisfying for me when we blow the doors off on a game with a one-man shop. For me, I can see that potential, and that's why I'm signing the game and working with that developer. But when the developer kind of realizes that and they're able to invest in growing their business, that's great too. One of the developers I work with, Sebastian Davies from Grumpy Rhino, has been able to open an office in London solely off of the revenues we've generated off of his titles. So that's been totally great. And that's a real mark of success. And then something much more mundane and practical is I came from really large companies before this, where I spent most of my time managing people and in meetings. It's a daily reminder of the success that Iron Horse has had for me is that I have one meeting a week, and that's it. I don't really do calls. I just work, and then I hang out with my 2-year-old son, and it is awesome.
Jealous. That sounds pretty awesome. Okay, so there's two things that I want to follow up with you on that kind of teased out of what you were just talking about. So one thing that was mentioned is sustainability. So building off that idea of success, okay, it's one thing to launch a game that does well, but how, especially as a smaller studio indie developers, how do you create that sustainability? That's pardon the pun, but the $1 million question, right?
Sure. For me, as a publisher, it's being a publisher, the reason that you're publishing games is it distributes your risk across a number of titles. So it's inherently much more stable than being an independent dev. Plus, we get snapshots of the market on a regular basis. Like, however fast you're shipping titles is nowhere near how fast the two of us are shipping titles. So literally, you know, at least once a quarter, most times it's multiple times in a quarter, we're seeing what the current snapshot of iOS and Android looks like, how difficult it is to get features, what CPIs look like with different genres of games and art styles. So that's an advantage of publishing that a lot of indie developers don't have. One of the hybrid approaches that we've been trying out at Iron Horse is to partner developers that have had success with new developers that we're onboarding for a portion of the revenue on the new game. And the idea there is the new developer benefits from the experience of the older developer. They get more attention than I can really give them being a single man publisher. And it also helps stabilize them financially a little bit between launches. And it's not a massive commitment, right? They're really playing builds, giving feedback on art style and execution, game balancing, monetization, stuff like that. Similar to what I do. It gives them a little bit more of a cash flow between launches, and they also get exposed to some of the stuff that I get exposed to. So they have the added benefit of seeing information on retention, how ads are performing, monetization.
Yeah, I would say too, if you're looking for like just as an indie to sustain success, I think you really need to identify what it is you're trying to create and how long that is supposed to take. If you're just making like one-off, you know, quick arcade games, that kind of thing, you need to set your scope properly, because scope creep is one of the worst things in our industry and can cost you a lot of money, and then you're not going to make that back if your launch doesn't go well. So understanding how you need to release those kind of games, if you're going to be a quick rapid fire making a couple games a year type of studio, or are you a 2-year long investment kind of studio or something above that? And then on that situation, you need to understand how to build your community, how to do your user acquisition, and how to make that game profitable, because you're spending a hell of a lot more money on that one than you are on the small ones. So you really need to understand what your business is and what you're trying to achieve, because you can't sustain one model by using a different model, and the models are changing all the time. So just ensure that you're keeping track with the marketplace, what's hot, what isn't. You know, if you're looking to, like I said, pump out a lot of games, be on top of what's being featured. You know, look at what Apple and Google like to put, you know, front and center, because they're showcasing your game to help represent their platform. So if it's something that is totally counter to what they're doing, you know, you're not playing ball with the platforms, and sometimes you got to play ball to get noticed.
One last question. There was also a mention around, Mike, you've been talking a lot about UA. There's also community building, which is so important. And I think a lot of really small indie studios struggle with building a community, building that loyalty, not only around your games, but around your studio, your brand. Talk to me a little bit about that and your approach.
Sure. Community building, I leave up to very capable developers. So if you're curious about how to build up an active community and engage with them, you should talk to Ben. We're actually just talking about that at lunch, and he does an exemplary job wading through the trenches with the players who have a lot of really pointed feedback about Ben's game and Ben generally. So you should, it's great. As far as marketing and user acquisition, I think there's a lot of mystique around it, right? Folks think it's some impenetrable thing that you need years of experience to do. My general rule of thumb is you should baby step when you first start with any user acquisition, and largely ignore what marketing companies are telling you. The only thing that really matters as far as you're concerned is, did you generate an equal amount of money or a greater amount of money from the users that you acquired than what you spent? That's it. Like, there's nothing, they're going to try and say, oh, you should look at retention because retention is really strongly correlated. Just ignore all that. It's like, did that user give you more money than you spent on it? Done. It's a really simple math problem. I think from there you can start doing things that are really interesting, which is, oh, did we have an increased organic impact on one platform over another? I mean, I, without shame, spend a ton of money on Google Play, and one of the reasons I do it is because the ROI is great, because CPIs are manageable on Google Play, but also there's a huge organic coefficient to my spend. So I do it, and I do it a lot, and I try and maximize that on that platform. And I think you don't get to a place where you're spending six figures on a platform overnight. I certainly didn't. we started spending, I don't know, $5,000 in a month or $3,000 in a month. And you get a really strong signal about what's working. So you start small, build up on your learnings, and then scale your spend appropriately based on the money that you get paid out from platforms, which is what I did.
Yeah, and I would also say know the game you're working on and who the players are going to be. So, I mean, I'm not, obviously you're all working on something different. You might still be making some sort of premium title. You might be making a free-to-play title. It doesn't really matter. But how you approach marketing those games in the community is definitely going to be different. If you're in the free-to-play space, like Mike said, the ratio is easy. Yeah. It's the way we do it too, is if you spend too much on a user, then stop doing that because you're never going to make money. But if you're doing a premium game, that doesn't really adhere because, a $5 premium game, you're never going to get, the rates to make that worth it. But then you have to take a different road, get on Discord or something and start building a community there about your game. Get on whatever forums or where people talk about similar games that yours is and start drumming up interest that way. Use things like the pre-registration and, other ways to help like drive engagement, especially for a paid game, because you need those users there to know when it's out, because it's a lot harder to sell when it's a paid game versus a free game. And then, if you can't do any of that stuff, that's, he doesn't do as much of that community engagement. We help with some of that a bit. Again, it's better to really have the developers talking about their game than a salesman. It feels a little greasier if it's a sales guy just pitching a game versus an actual, hey, I made this kind of thing. But we'll work with you on how to set that up. And yeah, it's just important to know where the people are going to be. Maybe you want to get your game featured on Polygon. You're probably not gonna, but I can at least open the doors for you and we can work on that kind of stuff. So it's things like that, like understanding what your game is and being realistic about that, and not just thinking that you're going to set the world on fire with every single game, because again, that's not the case. There's a lot of games that come out and not a lot make money. So
My personal favorite is Reddit. Free tool, and that's actually how I've discovered a couple of games and recommended folks to apply for Indie Corner featuring. That's a little self-promotion there. Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys.